Close, turn up volume. Recording. Hello, Rina. We can't hear you, but we see you.
On. Yeah, but I don't want to be on the screen.
Okay, fine. Yeah, just saying hi. That's it. Now, I'm going
Shavua
to.
Tov, Shavua Tov.
Yeah, I'm just going to share the screen, so they're not going to see you on the screen. I'm putting Microsoft PowerPoint share. Yeah, now you can show us the funny thing.
No, I've deleted it.
Why? It's too. It's not appropriate.
It's just a
Oh, by mistake, you.
It's just a habit. I look at things and then delete them.
Oh, I see. Well, there are lots of funny things now with AI.
Quite a lot of fun things. So there was one with Trump as a Hashverosh and Bibi as Mordechai and obviously Khamenei as Haman.
Yes. Okay. Allow. What is this saying? Allow. Okay. Um,
I think your daughter wants you, you say,
Continue to share.
watching you 180 degrees that way.
Hello, Mishka. Do you want to come and sit down? You want to come and listen? Or just watch from the side? What? I'm not doing laps, but you can sit next to me here. You want to sit next to me here? Okay, so take that chair. Sit next to see, when you get bored, you can just go upstairs, okay? You don't have to stay for the whole thing because it's going to be quite long.
Hi, Ossi.
Hello, Yael. How are you? You're not in Israel now, are you?
No, we were able to be back just on time.
Good timing. You had good timing. Better than Rabbi Dubov.
Yeah, I spoke with him actually a few days ago when we were still there, and he told me he's traveling.
So he was supposed to return today to Wimbledon to be here for Purim, and now he's stuck in Tzfat.
Yeah.
So we had to change around our plans. We're going to be doing our party here in Surrey tomorrow evening. And then Tuesday afternoon, we're going to go take over the show in Wimbledon.
Nice.
Take over Rabbi Dubov. So it's going to be 5:45.
Yeah.
Is going to be a half hour of activities like baking hamantashen and that sort of thing. And then 6:15, as soon as it's nightfall, we read the Megillah. And then after the Megillah, there will be food and music and fun and party. Avi, we'll see you tomorrow night. No, you make your own hamantashen.
I do, yeah. But also I'm at work. I'm
Okay.
traveling for work.
All right, just gonna see if Monique is coming. Let's see. So Adi is not coming because he's in Israel.
What
So
about drinking? Will there be drinking tomorrow? At Loyada?
yeah.
What will at Loyada?
We will have those that want to take and take. Cyril, so there's another person you haven't met him yet. His name is Cyril. He's lives in Chobham.
No way.
Yeah, he's your neighbor. So he's been one of the veterans of our adult education course, but exactly these first 2 weeks that we had, he's in South Africa visiting his family. He's returning tonight, so he joined on Zoom last week, but he'll be in person from next week.
Yeah, not believe that.
Not far, I'm sunny there.
No way. You're like 5 minutes from
Cyril, S-E-R-L-E.
From Chobham to
I don't know where Monique is. I'll wait 1 more minute.
Chuffed. Simple things make me happy.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
Yeah.
And Alexandra and
Brilliant.
Paul. Oh, Paul said he's joining at 7:05. I'll wait another minute to see what's happening with Monique. I'm sorry, everyone has a book?
Yep.
Do you want to make a tea or a coffee or something while we're waiting? That's the time, yeah. Well, you're gonna have a very nice and
So, did anyone watch YouTube last night and see what was happening in Finchley?
No.
The streets have been taken back. So, the whole area was Jewish when I grew up. Finchley.
You grew up in Finchley.
No, I grew up Woking. But when you go to a Jewish area, that's where you would go because it's not around here. Yeah. And when I went there about a year ago for a hospital appointment, it's like, what has happened to this area? There's no Hebrew. The only Hebrew writings to the hospital. And then I said something to one of my friends who's from there, and she goes, "It's been terrible for ages." Then last night, you see on YouTube, all the Iranians, Israeli flags.
Hello, Monique. We waited. You see, we knew we're not waiting for nothing. Yeah, right there next to. Hello, hello. Oh, hello, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Please take off your coat and make a tea. We'll start in just 1 minute.
Good. Hi, Ellie. Nice to meet you. Where do you want to sit?
Next to Monique, yeah, and close this door. Hey.
I wanted to buy some clothes. Indigo's the wall between. When I didn't go to spend the holidays with my family.
So did you were around when Waitrose was in Staines?
Yes,
They
they
used-
had the art.
Osha. That was the place to go. Waitrose
It
was
was
Staines.
20 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when I grew up, that's where you can.
Hello, Monique. Do you want to make a Sharpingo tea or something? Yeah. Well, we're waiting 1 more minute for someone to join on the Zoom. That said he's going to be
Yes, please.
running a minute late.
Essentially class.
No,
Hi there.
Is this my neighbour?
Cyril, he's coming next week. Andrew is
Next week,
Monique's
that's it.
husband. Andrew is Monique's husband.
Masquerading as Monique's husband.
Yeah,
Nice to meet
I'm putting
you.
two together. Brings a bit of pride.
yeah. And that's Chayamashka. That's our little daughter, Chayamashka. She wants to learn about grief. Yes, teach them at a young age.
Important.
Is important, yeah. The truth is, although the topic of this lesson will be about grief, and obviously we're specifically focusing about grief after the loss of a loved one, but grief is also a very general topic. Grief can be over anything. It can be grief, a child can be grieving over, a broken toy, or, there's, grief in life is important. It's important to, so we're going to learn the Jewish perspective on grief. Right. So we're going to begin now. Welcome everyone to lesson 3 of Journey of the Soul. So this is a 6-week course. So this week is the 3rd week. Now, to begin with a story, it's actually, there was a French stuntman. His name was Blondin in the 19th century. And he would basically take a tightrope and go across the Niagara Falls in a tightrope. And he had a whole crowd of people watching and cheering as he would go from one end to the other end of Niagara Falls. So after he goes across the Niagara Falls, he turns to the crowd and he says, "Who believes that I can go across the Niagara Falls blindfolded?" And everyone says, "We believe, we believe." He puts on a blindfold and he goes across the Niagara Falls. Then he comes back and he says, "Who believes that I can go across the Niagara Falls blindfolded while pushing a wheelbarrow?" And everyone says, "Yes, we believe, we believe." And he goes across blindfolded, pushing a wheelbarrow, and he comes back. He didn't fall off, Baruch Hashem. And now he turns to the crowd, and who believes that I can cross the Niagara Fall blindfolded with the wheelbarrow, with a person inside the wheelbarrow? Everyone says, "Yes, we believe, we believe." So then he turns to the loudest person. He says, "Okay, I need you to volunteer." And the person's like, "No, no, no, it's quiet." So what's the moral of this joke is that when we're speaking in theory, everything can be nice and fine. But when it comes to the practical, things can be different. Reminds me of another story / anecdote or joke. I don't know if it's true or not. But they say a story of there was once a rabbi who was also a wealthy businessman, and he owned a factory of timber or whatever, the factory. And he used to always preach and teach and learn about having faith in Hashem and belief and trusting that everything that happens is for the good. And there's always God. God does everything for a reason. And one day, one of his students was walking in town and saw that the factory, which belonged to the rabbi, burnt down. And that's it. His whole entire fortune in one day was completely vanished. He went to all the students, like, who's going to break the news to the rabbi to tell him without him like having, a shock, without him. So they went to his most prominent student and they said, you are tasked with the job to go to the rabbi and break the news that his factory broke down. So he comes up with this idea how to break the news. Sometimes you have to do it, slowly. You don't want to break the news really very drastically. So he goes to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, you always teach us, please tell me, what would you say is a person should do if they are facing hardship? So the rabbi says, we always learn, you need to always trust that everything is for the best and everything that God does is for the good. He's like, oh yeah, really? Tell me more. He's like, what happens if a person, loses all of his money, his whole fortune? What will you tell such a person? He says, yeah, even if it's difficult, we have to have faith. And then he turns to the rabbi, even if a person has an entire factory, which is his whole fortune, and that breaks down, and that whole thing burns down, what would you tell such a person? Yeah, we have to have faith. So he says, Rabbi, if so, you should have faith, because your factory burned down. As soon as the rabbi hears it, he faints. Because everything that we were preaching in theory, it's nice in theory, but once it's personal, then everything we learned, we seem to forget. And it seems to be irrelevant. So that's actually a nice segue into this third lesson, because up until now, the first 2 weeks was very much theoretical. We were speaking from the perspective of the soul, learning what happens after a soul passes away, how the journey of the soul continues, the soul carries on, and the life doesn't finish. Life as we know it, the physical body passes away, but the soul does still carry on. But now we're going to really shift focus from the lens of the soul of the person who passes away to us who are still here alive, who have to sort of deal with the loss and the grief of someone passing away. So now this lesson will be focusing on that, on our perspective. How do we do it? Both the practical, the sitting Shiva, what is the process, and how do we deal also emotionally with the grief? So to open up, as you can open up your books to page 84, text number 1. Yep. And we're going to start with 2 sort of case studies. These are both real stories, true stories of different people, how they dealt with the loss of a loved one in very, very different ways. So it's quite a long text. So I'm going to read it. I might not read the whole entire thing, but I'll start from the beginning and I'll skip out some parts. So text 1, Heather Lindquist was in the kitchen cleaning up after lunch when she heard a dull thud. It sounded as if it came from the hallway, and it was just a little too loud to ignore. Boys, she yelled. What are you up to? There was no answer. She found her 2 boys playing quietly on the couch in the living room. They giggled. You jokers, she said with a smile. What was that sound? And they shrugged. Where's your father? Without waiting for answers, she ran to the hallway. She ran out in fear when she found her husband, John, writhing on the floor. John had severe asthma. He was taking a new medication, and it seemed to be working. But suddenly he had collapsed in the worst attack he'd ever had. Heather tried everything she could think to save her husband's life. Then she called the ambulance. The rest was a blur. John died of cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital. Heather was 34 years old. Her boys were 5 and 7. At that moment, John's death felt like the worst thing that could have ever happened to her. Heather Lindquist had lived her entire life in the same quiet suburban community in northern New Jersey. She and John had been high school sweethearts. They married and purchased a small ranch-style house. They had children, they got a dog, the schools were good, and the community was stable. Heather thought that the television was on more than it should be, but other than that, everything seemed in order. Then John died, and she had to rethink it all. Now she was a single parent. She had to find new ways to earn money and also find extra time to be with her boys. And somehow she had to contain everyone's anguish. She found strength she didn't know she had. It was lonely and painful at times, but Heather found meaning and vigor and even joy in the idea that she was going to make it. I expected to collapse, I really did. That's what I wanted to do. That would have been the easiest thing to do, Heather explained, but I couldn't. Each day, I got up and did what I had to do. The days passed and somehow it was okay. The boys were great. They were upset in the beginning, of course. We all were. They hung in there and we stayed together. I love those boys so much. John would have been proud of them. So that is a real account, a first personal story of Heather, how she dealt with the loss of a loved one. Now, text 2, would you like to read? Text 2, this is going to be another story of somebody else, how they dealt.
In 2004, Stephanie Moldberg of Short Hills, New Jersey, lost her son Eric, 13, to Ewing sarcoma, a bone cancer. 4 years after Eric's death, Mrs. Moldberg, now 48, walked around like a zombie. I felt guilty all the time, guilty about living, she said. I couldn't walk into the deli because Eric couldn't go there any longer. I couldn't play golf because Eric couldn't play golf. My life was a mess. And I couldn't talk to my friends about it because after a while they didn't want to hear about it. Stephanie, you need to get your life back, they'd say. But how could I? On birthdays, I'd shut the door and take the phone off the hook. Eric couldn't come to any more birthdays. Why should I?
So here we have two stories of Heather and Stephanie, how they both dealt with their grief. So the question is, why do people react differently? Is Heather in denial? Because, she was just focused on, that we have to move on, life has to carry on. And on the other hand, was Stephanie overreacting, perhaps? Or maybe both were right and there's no right or wrong. So this is sort of an open-ended question. Why do people react differently?
I don't think, from my experience, especially in this country, I don't think people are well equipped to deal with death. I don't find we talk about it in the schools. People don't even talk about it in the families much. So when it happens, people don't actually know how to talk to their children, let alone how to deal with it themselves, I find. In agreement with women.
Anyone else?
Obviously, it depends on your relationship to the deceased, how close you were to the person who's died.
Yeah.
Regardless, death is going to affect you in some way or another, and everyone's affected by death. I mean, like at the beginning of these talks, it said that most people are, to an extent, scared of death.
Yeah.
So they respect it to that extent. It's the end of their life.
So what would you say? Yes, Andy.
So I think it's a personality thing,
Okay.
obviously, and different people will react differently to different situations. And I think that's kind of lead to where we might be going, is that if there is no procedure, if there is no framework with which you work your grieving and talk to other people about it, and you know what you need to do at certain stages, that counsel will help you through the process. Some people will find it okay because they're independent and they know how they want to run things, and some people will find it completely don't know what to do with themselves because there are no instructions.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think you're in a state of shock when somebody dies, so you're in fully control of your emotions, and you can't, because you're so sad and upset. You can't always think rationally in those.
You go through like 7 stages of grief, don't you? So and they can happen in different orders for different people as well.
Right, sure.
But I think in this case,
Yeah, let's look at these two specific stories
Yeah.
of Heather and Stephanie. What would you say?
but for me, sorry,
Yeah.
for me, one is worse than the other, if I may.
Yeah, and explain why.
Well, because Stephanie is losing a son, but the other one, as bad as it is to lose a husband and to raise 2 kids, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't feel it's as bad as losing
I support
a kid. So I don't know, but I would have liked it to be 2 different cases, because it's almost like it's normal that Stephanie doesn't deal with that. So who could deal with that?
Yes, Rina.
I just want to give from my experience how I see the two difference. The first, she had children that were living when the father was lost. And you feel I had 3 young children, and you feel that you've got to keep living for them. Everything has to be is focused towards them and keep going. Unfortunately, later on, their grief comes out. You can't control their grief. You think that you're in control of their grief and how they're experiencing life, but you don't. Their grief is individual, and it'll come out 10 years later, 5 years later. You know, with my kids, they all had the stages of when they dealt with their grief of losing their father. Now, with the second lady who lost her child, and the reason I feel that she was so overwhelmed was she felt that she'd lost everything. As a mother, she doesn't have that wanting to continue. She's just grieving what she lost, and she doesn't have a focus for the future. That's how I see it.
So if I have to summarize, we actually
children.
have a few different points here. Avi was saying that different people have different personalities. So different people feel and react to things differently. The second point that Miriam and Rina and the rest of you were saying was that the circumstances also play a role. It makes a difference if a person died, you know, suddenly without pain, like in the first story, whereas in the second story, sometimes it could be a long, you know, that specific type of cancer. You know, sometimes there has to be long amputating of limbs, and it could be a very painful thing. And also another difference is, like you mentioned, where in the first story we saw that she had 2 children that she sort of gave her purpose. Like, I need to do it for them. I need to wake up in the morning and carry on life for them. Whereas in the second story, we don't necessarily know. Did Stephanie, maybe that's it. You know, she had a child, and maybe now that she lost her child, there was nothing left worth to live for. And therefore she fell into this depression and chronic grief. Hello, Paul. Welcome, Paul. Sorry, nice to have you here. Just to fill you in very quickly, we're talking about why different people grieve differently. You know, some people fall into chronic depression, and some people, they sort of get the resilience to move forward. And the reality is that there is no right or wrong way to grieve, and different people grieve differently. And it's important not to judge other people, you know, friends, to sort of judge them for the way they're grieving, because until you're in their shoes, you don't really know what it's like. And it's important not to judge them, to know that no 2 people are the same and no 2 circumstances are the same. So no 2 people are alike and no 2 circumstances are alike. But having said that, with that introduction, with that caveat, what can we say that we can gain from the Torah perspective to help us alleviate the grief? Because one thing we know is, like Avi was saying, there is a framework that helps to be able to process the grief, because what we don't want to happen is to fall into chronic grief. There are a few things we don't want to happen. One thing is we don't want to be in complete shutdown and denial, because, like you said, it may come after, you know, 10 years. If you don't process it, it will one day come in some, who knows, it might come out in other ways, in harmful ways, or who knows what. So we don't want to be in denial and sort of fully numbness. On the other hand, we also don't want to be in chronic depression and chronic grief.
Physically, they may be dead, but their memories are not dead.
Yeah.
Your memories are not dead, so they're still alive to an extent.
Right. So that is basically the rest of this lesson. We're going to be learning, what is the Torah perspective? What does the Torah have to say? How can we find comfort? And how can we help us go through the process of dealing with our grief? So there's 3 things we're going to cover in this lesson. Number 1 is the Torah view on mourning and grief. Then the principles of how we can deal with our own chronic grief. And then, so the first 2 are more for ourselves. Like, when we are dealing with grief, what can we remember? What ideas can help us to manage that grief? And like I mentioned in the beginning of the class, that even though this class is specifically about grief from losing a loved one, really, I think this can apply to so many areas of life where we have to grieve anything, you know, grieve, like I said, for a child, it could be grieving, you know, a broken toy. For an adult, it could be grieving maybe a relationship, right? So these ideas maybe not all of them will translate to other areas of grief. I'm just putting this as a side point. And then at the end of the lesson, we're going to speak about how to comfort others. So we know it's a very big mitzvah to go, and when someone's sitting Shiva, to go and be there for them, to comfort them during Shiva. What is the proper way? Because as you know, when we're sitting Shiva, there's people do things sometimes because there's a sort of awkward, emotional awkwardness, and people say things that they shouldn't say. And so what is the proper do's and don'ts of when we're going to comfort others in a Shiva house? So that'll be the end of the lesson. So first, we're going to back up, because we like being a little bit philosophical, and we said, well, who says grief? Is grief even a good thing? Is it a proper thing to grieve? To be sad when someone dies? Okay, yeah. So it's a given that we know it is. It's actually a mitzvah to grieve. However, it's a mitzvah to mourn the loss of a loved one, which we'll see soon. But we have to actually see the two sides of the coin to be able to see, because there are others, especially real big philosophers, who believe that mourning is actually a sign of weakness. And someone who's truly intellectual person, like a philosopher, then death is actually a good thing. Because that's, as we learned in the other previous lessons, death is when the soul gets liberated from the limitations of the body. And if that's the case, then perhaps death is a good thing and should be celebrated. And so now we're going to see.
To say to me about when someone dies, he goes, you're crying for yourself. You're not actually crying for them because they're not here anymore. It's you. The grief is here with you.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's kind of saying it's a bit selfish.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's true, yeah.
So everyone heard of Socrates,
Yeah.
the philosopher Socrates. So here is an account. So he was sentenced to death by the ancient nobles in Greece because he was causing an uproar, and with his ideas, they're very controversial back in his day. And he was sitting there in prison. Eventually, they did put him to death. And there is an account that he wrote when he was discussing with his disciples. And this is from his writings in text 3. So, Miriam, would you like to read?
Here?
Yeah.
Please relay the following message to Evenus and bid him be of a good cheer. Say that I would have him come after me by immediately leaving this world, if he be a wise man and not tarry, and that today I'm likely to be going, for the Athenian say that I must.
He's basically saying that he's going to die.
Simmias said, what a message for such a man, having been a frequent companion of his. I should say that, as far as I know him, I will never take your advice unless he is obliged. Why? Said Socrates. Is not even a philosopher? I think that he is, said Simmias. Then he or any man who has the spirit of philosophy will be willing to die, but if he will not take his own life, for that he held to be unlawful. The day may come when you will understand why, though a man is better dead, he is not permitted to be his own benefactor, but must wait for the hand of another.
So this is, it sounds extremely strange to us, but ancient philosophers, they believed that, a true philosopher is someone who seeks death, but you're not allowed to take your own life. So you have to wait for it to be taken by another. And that's why actually he had, the historians say that he had an opportunity to escape through bribery, to escape prison, and he chose not to take it because, again, that would show that maybe he's fearful of death. So in other words, fearing death shows an intellectual weakness for these philosophers. So for him, it was like, no, we embrace death. And that was the belief of ancient philosophers. But we know that even though there's an element of that may be true based on what we learned in the first lesson, but the reality is that it's not true. Because why? There's a biblical mitzvah, text 4, Monique, text 4, page 88.
We are biblically commanded to mourn the deaths of our next of kin.
So there's a mitzvah, there's a commandment, biblical commandment, to mourn the next of kin. Now, by the way, the mitzvah of mourning the next of kin if you turn to page 92 in your books, you will see the biblical mitzvah of mourning applies to these next of kin, which would be mourning for the loss of a mother, a father, spouse, sibling, son, or a daughter. Those are the next of kin for whom you have a biblical commandment to mourn. But the question is why? Why is it a mitzvah to mourn? Seemingly, Socrates has some logic in his point, because death, like we said, it's not the end of life, and the soul carries on. And like we learned last week, the soul is more free. So why are we mourning? Isn't that a lack of faith in God? The fact that we would mourn? So why? Why do we mourn? So we're going to see now three answers, each one building on the other one.
It is actually ambivalent. It is because in a way we could be happy because the soul falling back, but in a way we're not, because I think it's because we're here.
Why? So why is it okay to mourn? Well, let me pose to you the question this way. Is it just that it's okay to mourn, or it's that we should mourn? The question is it just that the Torah is saying that it's okay to mourn? It's like it's allowed.
Yeah.
They're giving you an allowance that, okay, if you feel the need, you may. It's not forbidden. It's not a problem. Or is it proactively something which is encouraged, which is a mitzvah, which we should do?
The psychology of human nature, that if you don't, if you block yourself sooner, like you said, sooner or later, it will come out in different way, maybe skin allergy or, all sorts of things that can
Right.
come out.
Even in physical ways.
Yeah, definitely. You can, and then you by blocking yourself is definitely not.
Back
the
pain
right
is
step.
another one.
Yeah, and breathing at the right time, but when do you know when to stop? That's the thing.
Right.
So that's the difficulty that everyone can be faced, and you don't know until you are facing it. I don't think you, like you said, you have two ways: talking intellectually and living it. No one know unless you go through how
Right.
how you know enough how you're going to react. You just don't unless
So
you're
the
living it.
intellectual process,
Yeah,
emotional
yeah.
process.
Sure.
If it wasn't right to mourn, why visit his grave? Why go?
Right.
Why do anything like that? You know, if the intellectuals are right, and that when someone dies, it's not right to mourn. That, to me, that can't be right. I
Right.
think you gotta,
Right. So now we're going to discuss why, and we'll give three reasons. Each one is sort of building on the other. So page 89, text 5, we have 5a, 5b, and 5c. So Andrew, would you like to read? This is from Nachmanides, not to be confused with Maimonides. This is Nachmanides. So page 5a, text 5a. Andrew, would you like to read?
The Torah does not forbid us to weep, because it's human nature to be moved into tears and separated from loved ones, and that they're journeying away, even if they're alive.
So, we sent off our son Moshe last year to a winter camp for the first time. He went away for a week. And, there's the concept of homesick. And when you're departing with a loved one, even if they're still alive, they're just flying to another country, we can get emotional. We can be tearful, right? Even if they're still here, they're just in another place. This is actually a deeper meaning, that even though we know that the soul remains alive and it carries on, but because it's moving on to another place. So just like in this world, even when someone is still alive, but they're just going to another, they're traveling abroad, we feel that sort of, that the tears. So the same thing, even though we know the soul is still alive, but it's distance from us now. We can't hug them anymore. We can't be close to them physically. So the first, yeah.
Grieving. What is grieving?
What does grieving
Is-
mean?
Yeah, is it expressing all the emotions? Is that what it is? What is grieving?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, and a basic,
Even loss of
Living your
someone.
emotion,
Yeah.
living it.
Feeling the pain.
Feeling
the pain.
Yeah. And allowing yourself to feel it.
Yeah.
Not to blocking yourself.
But as we'll see soon, there's also
Yeah.
rituals that we do as part of the grieving. So it's not just the feeling, but primarily grieving is the feeling of the pain. Yeah. Of a loss of something.
Mourners find comfort in crying and in arousing their sorrow until their bodies are too weak to handle the intensity of their internal turmoil. Just as happy individuals find contentment in various forms of light-hearted activity.
So the first text was from Nachmanides. The second one is from Maimonides. Can anyone suggest what the second text is adding on the first one? The first text, it said that the Torah does not forbid us to weep. Whereas the second, Maimonides, he adds on that. What is it? What would you say that that's adding on the first one?
Well, he's talking about releasing your grief.
And he's
By
thinking about the
by
benefit.
crying, you're releasing it, and until your body's completely exhausted. So we shouldn't be grieving forever. So this is a way of not getting into a depression. Grieve, let it cry, get it out of your body.
Right.
So it's a release.
But also crying is, to an extent, asking other people to join with you in mourning the dead,
Yeah.
mourning your bereavement or whatever it is. You're asking for sympathy and for support by
Right.
crying.
Absolutely. And that is a very big part of it, is having the support of others that are coming to witness and be there with you. So the first text was basically saying that, but since it's a natural reaction, so the Torah says you're allowed to do it, but he doesn't necessarily point to there being any benefit in doing it. It's just that is the way humans react. So fine, it's allowed. Whereas the Rambam, Maimonides, he actually says no, like it has psychological benefits to a person crying. It's healing in a way. And now we're going to go even one step further. So Andrew, if you can read the third one, text 5c.
One of the generation's greatest personalities failed to shed a single tear upon losing a son. Is this a praiseworthy section? Answer. Such behavior is offensive and objectionable. It demonstrates heartlessness, distasteful character, and cruelty. This is the way of philosophers who maintain that this world is without purpose. By contrast, we who've received the Torah are expected to believe and to realize that this world is of great value for those who properly utilize their time here and behave appropriately. It is through our actions in this world that we merit the world to come. Crying, mourning, and shedding tears over the passing of a relative, and especially for an honorable individual, is the way of the pious, the prophets, and individuals renowned for their good deeds. It is not for naught that our sages instruct us to observe 3 days for weeping, 7 for eulogies, and 30 for restrictions on wearing new clothing and getting haircuts, etc. If weeping were improper, the sages would not have instituted a 3-day weeping period. In fact, the Torah emphasizes that our forefather Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and weep for her, and that Jacob, King David, and countless individuals of similar caliber acted likewise.
So what is this text adding on the previous two? The first text said that we're acknowledging a human reality, that people will cry when they're in pain. So it's allowed. We're not gonna restrict you from doing that. Second one says no. It has healing benefits. You cry, it helps you heal, and therefore it's encouraged. It's not only allowed, but it's encouraged. But even with the second text, you can say that is ultimately because it's a human frailty. Like humans, because we're weak, we need to cry to heal. So it's allowed. But the third text actually says no. It's actually shows our belief in a true value. The value is the value of life, and it's acknowledging what we learned earlier in the first lesson, that when the person passes away, then they don't have any more the opportunity to fulfill their mission here in this world. They're just going into the retirement home up in heaven. This world is where we can actually make a change. That's the whole purpose of creation, including heaven and all the higher spiritual worlds. It was all for this world, for the giving of the Torah, and for us to be able to be in this world and live ethical lives and do something positive in this world. And when we die, the reason why we're sad is because because that opportunity is now
Gone.
finished.
Yeah.
So by crying, it's acknowledging that. Now, just to explain, we said in the beginning of the lesson that we don't judge, and no two people mourn the same way. And we don't judge the way one person grieves versus the way another person grieves. So if you had in this sort of responsa, the question and answer was about a person who didn't shed a tear. We're not talking about a case that the person didn't shed a tear because he was numb and that was just his way of reacting. It was referring to a person who was a very high caliber, and for him, it was a philosophical view that one shouldn't shed a tear. It wasn't just, sometimes you see, that some people react and you don't see they don't express their pain. They don't cry. They say that men are more,
There's definitely a difference. Like the answers you're getting, there's definitely different answers between men and women.
right. So
Without
just
doubt.
explaining this situation over here. All right.
I didn't realise that until tonight.
Then you did natural, don't they?
Right. So in this story, he wasn't shedding a tear, not because that just was his way of reacting. It was a philosophical reason. And that's why the answer, it was actually, he wrote very harshly about this person because that's not the Jewish way. We see Jacob. Where did Jacob weep when he was mourning? Where do we have Jacob weeping?
Sarah?
What?
The death of Sarah, maybe?
Jacob. Yaakov.
Oh, yes,
When he thought that his son Joseph was Rachel, maybe also, it says it, yes, yeah. But also earlier when he thought that his son Joseph was killed by the wild animals when their brothers.
Yeah.
So it says that he mourned for 22 years. He thought he was dead, and that's why it's actually interesting. Rashi explains that he mourned for 22 years. Rashi says a very fascinating thing, that God made it human nature that when we cry after a period of time, about a year, eventually we get over it slowly. But Jacob, 22 years he was mourning. He was in chronic grief. Why? Because it wasn't true. He didn't really die. There was something there that he wasn't able to feel. He didn't feel that he died. So he wasn't able to fully heal because it wasn't true. Okay.
Instinct or the
Yeah, exactly, his instinct. So now we carry on. So now that we know the reason why it's important to grieve and to mourn, now let's actually go through what is the framework. Avi mentioned before, the Torah gives us a framework of how we grieve. It's actually in stages. If you remember last week, we learned very, very fascinating how the soul leaving the body also doesn't happen at once. It also happens in stages. So this week we're going to speak how to mirror that, the way we process the grief happens in stages. So what are the stages?
Just on this,
Yeah.
does it not include grandparents?
Very good question.
Because that's the first person that dies.
Yeah.
When you're down here, the first person is this generation.
So grandparents, we can mourn for them, but what we're going to mention right now is the rituals of mourning, which is to tear the clothing, sit in a low stool, and all those things, sit shiva. We don't have to do that for a grandparent. Of course, the emotional feeling of grief and participating in that can be for a grandparent, can be for anyone, but the specific rituals of mourning apply to these 6 people. And as we'll see, that there is some differences for parents. It is more extended compared to the other next of kin, spouse, sibling, and children. So let's go through what is the framework. So the Torah philosophy is the purpose of all creation is this physical world and God's desire. So now the first stage is called aninut. Aninut.
Is that Hebrew?
Yeah, it's a Hebrew word. And the person is called a onen. Aleph, vav, nun, nun. Onen. I'm not sure what the actual word in Hebrew. Maybe Yael, do you know? Familiar with the word aninut or onen?
Aninut is normally delicate. So
No, with the 2 alephs.
yeah, in which no, I'm not familiar with it.
So I'm actually not sure what the actual word means, but it's a halachic, it's a Hebrew word. I'm not sure the exact translation of the word, but onen refers to a person who, after your loved one passes away, from that moment of passing until the burial, that time frame the person who is grieving is called a onen, and the period of time is called aninut. Never. So that's what it's called. Maybe I'll check up after to see the actual meaning of the word, but that's what it means. Now this is the most intense phase because until the person is buried, there is a certain, there's first of all, there's still the shock. And we also need to be now preoccupied with the preparations for the burial. And we need to do all those things. It's very, very intense time, which is also why in Judaism we do try to do the burial as quick as possible. We don't want to extend this period for a prolonged time. We want it to be maximum 1 to 2 days. In Israel, they do it even often on the same day. In the diaspora, it's a little more difficult usually till you get the go-ahead. The green paper, usually it's the next day. But the next day it shouldn't be prolonged longer than that unless there's a really good reason. Now, in Hebrew, this is the concept called Meito mutal lefanav. So it says in Ethics of Our Father, don't try to comfort someone when Meito mutal lefanav, when the dead person is there in front of you, don't try to comfort. Like, there's no point. You can, and this has actually a more broader meaning as well. I don't remember, it came up in our family the other day, but like when something happened really bad, like until you know the person was able to, let's say, do something about it, don't try to like give words of comfort because they're not helpful at this stage. At this stage, the person is fully preoccupied. Now, what are the laws? What are the rituals during the stage of Aninut? So this is the time period from passing until interment. Interment is the fancy word for burial. So what are the laws and traditions? Don't try to console the mourners. And the mourner is fully absolved from doing any mitzvahs. For example, no praying, no tefillin. If you're a man, he doesn't have to do anything. All the focus is on the dead one and to be able to bring them to burial. Immediate family members tear part of the outer garments. This is in Hebrew called kri'ah. We tear the garment. That's done at some point between the passing and the burial.
Is this a tradition or is it a
Yes.
religious thing?
What?
Is it a tradition or is it a religious?
It's a religious tradition.
So in other words,
It's the what we see in the Torah, that Jacob tore his clothes. We see many instances in the Torah that when they were grieving, they tore their clothes. So it is from the Torah to tear your clothes. Now, actually, on this, yeah.
No, I was just wondering how the film called The Jazz Singer, when Laurence Olivier tears the clothes of the jazz singer of Neil Diamond, because he's upset with him because he wasn't abiding by the laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a way of expressing displeasure as a Jewish person to
It's
someone
like
who
it,
doesn't
yeah.
keep to the commandments and all the rest of it. That's why he tore his, and he was marrying whatever it was, somebody wasn't Jewish or something like that. So he tore his suit.
It wasn't very
No,
nice,
that's not
was
the
it?
reason.
It's like you're dead to me.
Don't just do it.
First time I
That's
saw
not the reason, no.
Yeah.
I always associated that with sort of.
It's just like the first bit of programming we get, isn't it? That film, a
Yeah,
lot of it.
I haven't seen it, so
Somebody visually see
yeah.
it, and it wasn't done in a particularly nice way.
No.
It's done in hate, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, so I'm happy you brought that up because that's not at all the reason. Unfortunately, you know, that's looking at it in a negative way. So no. Now, I don't know what the custom is here, sort of in the general society, not the Jewish world. What do people do? I know in America, it's become sort of popularized to give the mourners a black ribbon, and then they tear the ribbon. They wear a ribbon on their suit, and they tear the ribbon. Now that is not the proper way of doing it. We should actually tear our the clothing, like a suit or a shirt or a suit, and not just a ribbon. Okay.
Very quick question. Where do we do the Kyria? Above our
Edge of the
heart
shirt,
line?
yeah. Sorry?
Where do we do the Kyria? Above the heart line? Is it
Yes,
to the
correct.
left?
Above the
Yes.
heart line.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
Now the next, so this is the stage of Aninut from the moment of passing till the burial. Then comes the Shiva, which is the 7 days of mourning. We're skipping it here because we're going to actually get to that in detail at the end of the lesson. Then comes Shloshim. Shloshim means 30. So this is the 30 days of mourning. What do we do? This is 30 days mourning starting from the burial. So it's a question. Let's say if someone passed away on Tuesday and the burial was on Wednesday, when do you start counting the 30 days? From the day of passing or the day of burial? So there are different opinions. So we go after the day of the burial. 30 days starts from then. Now, what do we do in this period of time? We avoid buying new clothing. It's more, you think about the spirit. What's the point? We don't want to do something that would be celebration and happiness. So we're not going to listen to live music, go to a concert, or go to we're going to take a haircut, or festive events, go to weddings. So we're not going to do that because that sort of interferes with the mourning and grieving process. So the mourner will avoid doing those things during the shleishim. And it also gives them sort of a significant, tangible way to know, because so often we go back into work. Sometimes we have to go back to work very soon and sort of back to normal life, and sometimes it can be too soon. But by having these specific rituals that we keep doing, it sort of is an anchor to remember that life isn't normal, not fully back to normal, and this is sort of a reminder of. So that's why it's so important to do these things. The next stage is the 12-month period, where again 12 months from the day of burial, and this period applies to this also. The 12-month only applies to a parent. So when you're mourning a parent, because there's a special mitzvah of honoring one's parent, so the mourning extends for 12 months, whereas for a sibling or the others, we don't have to. It only goes till 30 days, and then that's it. But for a parent, it applies for 12 months, and it's not the same level of restrictions of mourning. So, for example, you're allowed to cut your hair or take haircuts, but we still try to avoid going to festive events. And also we'll light a candle. Some have a very beautiful custom of lighting a candle, because it says Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, that the soul is like a candle. So we light a candle, and nowadays if you go to the stores, to the Kosher Kingdom or whatever, you can buy these long 7-day candles. So essentially, if you buy 52 of them, and every 7 days you change the candle, then you have a candle being lit for the entire 12 months.
Because but in a synagogue, but in electric.
Yes. No, but we're talking about have a real candle.
The real candle.
So you can buy the 7-day candles. Now they have even 9-day candles. So each one lasts for about a week, and you light it, and then when it finishes, you light another one. So in your home, like they call it a yahrzeit candle, right?
Yeah.
So a yahrzeit candle we light is a 24-hour candle, which we light every year on the day of a yahrzeit. But for the first 12 months after the passing, yeah, Ner Neshama is a yahrzeit candle, yes. 12 months. So you can buy a candle that will last for 7 days.
7 days.
So if you buy every week, you do a new one, and then it will last for the whole year.
It's finished anyway. It mustn't stop. I mean, you go.
It's not perfect, maybe you're traveling, but you try it. It should be always lit. And then the next one is every year, the yahrzeit is the day of the passing, the anniversary of the passing. And what do? We say Kaddish, which we're going to learn more about the Kaddish next week. And we do additional Torah study. Basically, we want to do things in memory of the soul. Again, we'll learn more about this next week. And extra good deeds in their memory. Okay. Now there was an Israeli psychologist. His name was Dr. Rubin. In the 1980s, he studied in great depth grief, and he basically came to this conclusion, sort of his study, that there were many studies done on grief, and he basically categorized them in 2 buckets. There was one set of studies that was looking at people, how they reacted to losing a loved one. And the first bucket of studies was looking at the person's ability to get back to normal life and his ability to function after when he was going through grief. In other words, looking at the barometer for being able to process grief was how well is the person able to function in the world. So that was one bucket of studies. And the other one was looking more at the relationship that the person has with the deceased, from being fully preoccupied, and like with Stephanie, who wasn't able to celebrate a birthday or go into a restaurant because Eric can't, so how could I? So being so preoccupied with the one who passed away that they can't go back to their own life. So those are the 2 types of studies, and he basically collected them all together, and he actually was analyzing how, when you look at the Jewish process and the rituals of how we process the mourning, he was able to see how it actually how it deals with both of these 2 areas of function and relationship. So to show you what that means. You remember, so let's just go back. So there's basically Can I stay for one more minute? Okay. Kamishka was a very good student. She was listening very well. Okay, gute Nacht. Here, you want to close the door? Okay, thanks. So, if you think about, the person's ability to function. So in the first stage, you see how there's a sort of a gradual process. In the first stage of aninut, we say the person, he can't function and we shouldn't expect him to. That's why he's absolved from doing any mitzvot. You can't do anything because there's no function. Then when you go on to the next stage of the Shiva, over here, there's already a little bit of function because you need to entertain the guests that are coming for the Shiva. So there is, but I don't have to go to work yet, right? That's already too much to jump back into work. But I am having to wake up in the morning, get dressed, come and be there with all the people that are coming to visit. So it's a slow level of getting back to function. Then after 7, it's not good to work during the 7 days. You shouldn't go to work back to work. It's too quick. You should stay home for the whole 7 days. After that, you can then go back to work. But there's still certain things that we do that remind us that life isn't fully normal. So we see this idea that there's a process of how we go from non-function to function. It happens in a process. Same thing is the focus on the person who passed away versus getting back to my own life. In the beginning, we see the same gradual thing. How in the beginning, I'm not thinking about myself at all. I'm only thinking about burying the dead one. And then during the 7 days, we speak about them and we're developing the evolved relationship, because we said that our relationship changes from being a physical relationship to a spiritual relationship. And therefore we talk about their life. And, so we see, it was just an interesting idea. Although we believe that the reason why we do the commandments in the Torah is because God commanded us to do them. Not because they have psychological benefits, but we believe that because God created the world ultimately, so by doing the mitzvot, we can understand that they could have psychological benefits, but that's not the main reason why we do them. So for example, people come up with all sorts of ideas as to why, kosher may be more healthy, all sorts of reasons. It's not to say that's the reason why we do it, but there might be other layers to it. So from this thing also, just to explain, the reason why we mourn is because it's a mitzvah. But it's just from the lens of a psychologist, he was explaining how it does very much mirror the process of grieving, like you said, how the grieving happens, in stages. And so now, one of the most intense rituals of grieving is the tearing of the garments. So why is that so important? So where do we have the story of tearing the garment? I mentioned in text 6, the story when the brothers took the garment of Joseph and they dipped, everyone is familiar with the story, right? With the brothers of Joseph.
Yeah.
They dipped the garment, they sold him off to the Egyptians, dipped his garment in blood, and they made up a story that he was eaten by a wild animal. And then we see here in text 6, you see Jacob rent his garments. And he placed sackcloth on his loins. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I just told you the story. But we see here clearly, what did Jacob do? He tore his garments. And why is this so important? Because we cannot begin to heal until we acknowledge that and accept that there is a loss. Because so long, they say that when someone's in denial, so to give you an example from a different topic, if someone has an addiction, so they say that so long that the person is in denial, there's no way for them to begin to heal. The first step to recovery is to come out of denial, to know that there's a problem. There is a phrase, it says in Hebrew, Yidiat ha'machala chatzi refuah. Knowing that there's an illness is already half of the recovery. So same thing. Okay, so let's move on here. So we got the function and the relationship. Okay, so the psychological benefits. So tearing the garment. So you mentioned before the movie, right, about tearing the garment being a sign of showing that he's done something wrong, displeasure. So let's sort of reframe that idea. Because Jacob surely...
He said, you are dead to me now.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not just a displeasure. He literally said to his own son,
Yeah,
because he wanted to marry out,
yeah,
Yeah,
and then he disagreed with that. So he said, "You are dead to me
he
now."
left his wife,
And then
his Jewish
he
wife.
told his
I see.
his own
He left his Jewish wife
jacket.
for somebody who wasn't Jewish.
Yeah.
Right.
So
He was no longer in the Jewish family.
Right.
his son was a little, but he said, "You are dead to me now."
Oh, I see. I see.
It's quite traumatic.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
horrible.
Especially when you're young, when
Yeah.
the first time you see this film
I
as
see.
well.
Yeah.
So, what is the reason why we tear the garments when someone passes away? So I said, when do we tear the garments? It's done usually at the funeral. So it's done at any, it doesn't have to be at the funeral, but it's done at any point between the passing and the burial. Very often it's done at the funeral. The rabbi will come. I've unfortunately had to do it. It's a very intense moment, especially if it's done in front of people, because it's like a physical expression of the loss. And it's almost like in the beginning, we're in shock, so we can be in denial. But by doing that, it's a visual, physical expression, an acknowledgement, an acceptance that there is a loss.
Do you use
Yeah, yes. Use a pocket knife or, yeah.
Not
So-
like in the movie.
No.
You've got
No.
to see this. Go on YouTube later on.
Okay, yes, you'll come.
It'll take you 30 seconds and you'll know what we're talking about.
What-
Why we're all disturbed
Yes.
by it.
What if there's no rabbi available, like, and I'm on my own?
If you're on your own, you do it yourself.
I do it myself, which is what I did. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So text 7, Avi, would you like to read page 98? The reason why we tear the garments.
Rabbi Yaakov, what?
Hagiz.
Chagiz, states
Yeah, okay. It's just a book.
in what?
Halachot ktanot.
It's all easier.
Yeah, you can read it in Hebrew. You want to read it in Hebrew? Yeah, okay.
Understand. That mourners are instructed to rend their garment as a method of distracting from and reducing the overwhelming grief. In my humble opinion, the opposite is true. Having to rend their garment brings mourners to tear and amplify their pain. The goal is to encourage mourners to express their pain over the passing and to experience the tremendous loss.
So the act of tearing the garment very often will trigger the beginning of the mourning process for the mourner. Up until now, they may be very numb and in shock and in disbelief, and very often that tearing of the garment will trigger the beginning of the mourning. So now, while it's important to mourn, but ultimately the goal is not to get stuck in grief. And that's why there is a framework. There's the 3 days of weeping, 7 days of Shiva, 30 days. So we see in text 8. Rina, would you like to read text 8? Page 99.
Okay. Neither cry for the dead nor bemoan him, neither cry for the dead more than necessary, nor bemoan him more than what is prescribed. How are we expected to act? 3 days for weeping, 7 days for eulogies, and 30 days for brackets new clothing and haircuts. Once these have elapsed, Hashem declares you're not more compassionate than I.
So God is saying, ultimately, there is ultimately, as much as it is important to mourn and grieve, but the goal is ultimately to be able to get up after Shiva. There's a concept. Shiva, we sit down and then we say, we're getting up from Shiva. That's the sort of expression we use. Now, as we mentioned in the beginning, everyone mourns differently. Some people, 3 days is not enough of weeping, and 7 days is not enough, and 30 days is not. And so, of course, the emotional process is not rigid. It's not we're saying, do this for 3 days, that for 7 days. That's more about the rituals, the emotional process. Everyone is, does it in their own time. But ultimately, as we understand from this medrash, from the Talmud, is that God is saying, you're not more compassionate than I, meaning ultimately the goal is not to get stuck in the grief, but to be able to ultimately move on. So the question is how? If somebody feels a really, really pain of the pain of losing someone, how could we move on? So I would like to ask a question to you, again, an open-ended question. Based on anything we learned up until now in the course, which sort of, if you had to, give guidance or comfort to someone that's saying, I'm struggling to move on, I'm feeling very in pain and sad and about the loss of a loved one, what things would you maybe tell them, or based on what we learned until now, to help them find comfort?
Stories about them.
So to celebrate their life, their accomplishments, what they've done. Yeah.
I would go and start to talk about their neshama, and that it's not the end, but the beginning of a new journey, and
So the
speak
idea that
about
the
the soul's
soul-
journey.
So you're right. So the death isn't the end.
Yeah.
The soul still carries on. Right. It wouldn't comfort you.
No. No.
Why?
Because it doesn't do anything to my pain, knowing that they are going, doesn't do anything to my pain.
Because the lack is still there for you. Their physical presence is absent.
Feeling what is done is to have a presence for the more that you have a presence over the people. And I definitely agree with Miriam that whatever can be said is not going to reduce your pain, and sometimes ignite even more the pain, because some things can be said, and and sometimes a smell or a word, and immediately you react.
Right.
And sometimes a speech can make even worse for the person's mourns. So at the end of the day,
Right.
And then I think it's more for the soul what is said than for the person who grief.
I mean, it comforts me.
But no, now we're talking about, this lesson is talking about the person who's grieving.
But it doesn't comfort me if somebody says, "Oh, don't worry, his soul is now
Right.
liberated."
Yeah.
So we will get to that. So we will be addressing what you're saying.
I think it all depends on somebody's emunah, and everybody's different.
Right.
And the reason I said what I did was my emunah is energy never dies. The end is not the end. And that's so everybody has their own philosophy. So I would try to help somebody with that type of belief, and bring them back to the roots of what it says in the Torah.
I think it's also about their legacy as well. You take somebody like Jonathan Sacks. When he passed away, everyone's talking about his accomplishments, his books, his knowledge, and the loss to the Jewish community of somebody as important as that. And therefore, the person's legacy, what he did, how much he did for other people,
Very good.
charitable work, those sort of things can help to comfort you, because you can say, well, he was trustee in this, that, and the other charity. He wrote this book, that book, and he helped people who were in trouble, who needed him. That's the important.
So he lived a fulfilling life.
I think it's important how much the person who died helps other people, and how much we draw attention to the fact that he didn't help others.
Right. Very good. These are very good points. Yeah.
Question complete, because the question is, what do you say when? Not what do you say, because you will say different things.
Right.
Different times,
True.
according to where.
So when you're going in a Shiva house, you're going to comfort someone, there is a traditional, before you get up to leave, there is a traditional one-line prayer, if you want, or line of comfort that we're traditionally supposed to say before we get up and leave the Shiva house. This is from text 9a on page 100. And are you familiar with this verse? Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May the omnipresent, which is God, console you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Is anyone familiar with that text? Okay, so tearing the garments, this is, just to catch up here, this is acceptance of the reality, and Shiva is for processing the pain. So you are not more compassionate than I. Okay, so how can we find comfort? So Hamakom Yenachem, this is if you open up like the prayer book, and it says when you're going to mourner's house, this is and very often they will have this actually printed out for people to read. Obviously, you comfort them however you want, but before you leave, this is the text. In Sephardim, they say, Min hashamayim tinuchamu. They should be, you should be comforted. But this is in Ashkenazic custom to say Hamakom. Hamakom is actually one of the names of God. But Hamakom means the omnipresent, meaning the one who is God, who is everywhere. That's why it's called Hamakom. Makom means space. So God, who fills the entire space, he's everywhere, he's omnipresent. So may the omnipresent God console you, together with all the other mourners that are mourning the destruction of the temple of Zion and Jerusalem. Very strange text. Any questions that you would ask about this text? Anybody?
What they saying?
Yeah.
Everyone?
Right. So we're saying you're not the only one that's mourning. Essentially the Jewish people were all in exile in a stage of mourning. We're mourning the temple. So why do we mention that? And also, why do we say, may God console you? I am coming to give you comfort.
Maybe it's to demonstrate that things could be a lot worse than they are, to the fact that we're mourning
Okay.
sort of little things in comparison to something like the destruction of the temple, which is major.
Interesting.
But
So you're saying
it
that,
helps to put it in perspective.
but does that maybe minimize the person's pain? When you come to comfort someone that lost someone, you're like, oh, you should know, it's not that bad,
People have it worse.
Probably make them annoyed.
It would make them annoyed,
I'll
right?
see you on it.
Why you think that Avivat Zion Yerushalayim actually means mourning the temple and not the nation? Because that's
but-
how I read it.
Well, what are we mourning? The mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, what are they mourning? They're mourning, Jerusalem used to be temple of glory, and then the Jews were taken into exile and they lost. So therefore we're mourning.
Zion and Yerushalayim are other people who have personal loss.
No, we don't mean the people who are in Jerusalem who are mourning. We mean the people who are mourning over the loss of Jerusalem and Zion.
Okay.
That's what it means. But the question is, why do we bring that in? And so there's a few different ideas that are in this sentence, and I'm going to share very briefly some of them. Number one, the first message is, when I'm coming to sit next to the person who's mourning, I don't have the answers. I don't have the ability to sort of give you some magic formula to make you feel better. So what we're saying is, ultimately, it is God who has the ability to give you the comfort. God, he created us in the natural way that, they say time heals. It's incorrect. Time doesn't heal. God heals, but sometimes through time.
Yeah.
God heals through time sometimes. But the first message is Hamakom Yenachem. It's God who's going to give you comfort. The second message is, why are we connecting this to the destruction of the temple, the mourning over the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple? So there's a very beautiful message which the Rebbe wrote in a letter of comfort. It was which he wrote to Ariel Sharon, who was an IDF general in 1967 when his son Gur passed away. The Rebbe wrote a letter of comfort, a condolence letter to Ariel Sharon, and in that letter the Rebbe explained this text. Why are we mentioning Jerusalem over here? So, Yael, are you able to read?
Yeah, which section?
Page 101, 9b.
9b. Do you want me to read it in Hebrew? No.
Whichever you prefer.
Read it in English. In regard to Zion and Jerusalem, the Romans, and before them the Babylonians, were given dominion only over the wood and the stone, silver and gold of the temple's physical manifestation, but not over its inner spiritual essence contained within the heart of each and every Jew. Over this, the nation have no dominion, and it stands eternally. So too, regarding the mourning of the individual, that dominates only the physical body and concerns of the deceased person. Sorry about the accent, by the way. The soul, however, is eternal. It has merely ascended to the world of truth.
So the analogy to the temple is just like the temple. They were only able to destroy the temple physically, but the spirituality of the place, you see till today, people go to pray at the Western Wall because no burning of the temple, nothing, no destruction, physical destruction can take away the spiritual significance of that place. So they can only destroy the external, the body, the building, the stones and that was there. But the meaning, the symbolism, no one can take away. Same thing is we're telling that to the mourner. The body is what was taken away. Maybe that's what's gone. That's what's different now. But the soul can never be taken away. Remember the story we had in the first lesson about the Rebbe who they said, I'm not afraid of the gun because we have one God in two worlds. So you can take away my physical body, but you can't take away my belief. You can't take away my soul. So that is another message that we're saying here is that just like the temple can only be physically destroyed, but not spiritually, so too, when a person passes away, they're only physically passed away, but spiritually their soul is still here.
That's why we're still here.
Yeah. Now there's also another very beautiful message of comfort. And this is another very beautiful one. And
It's
yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
to come with this as a comforting
Yeah.
words to go and say, well, don't worry about it. It's the same as the temple. It's just been destroyed physically, but spiritually it's still there.
Right. But we're not.
That's something you say to someone who's just lost a loved one. I find it difficult,
Yeah.
even if it's comforting.
I think it could depend on the person. In other words, we're not saying this to diminish the pain of of their physical loss, but sometimes, again, people who could relate to the spiritual side of things might be able to use that as something to give them an anchor to hold on to give them comfort. Otherwise, they can feel completely lost, like from everything to nothing. You had them a moment before, and now there's nothing left of them. That can be very painful. So again, not to say that maybe some people would find this, that it doesn't bring them comfort. But there's a third point as well, and this is not in here. I'm sharing it. It was mentioned in a different letter, which is the fact that we have community. We have, like you mentioned before, that others are coming to be there with you. That provides comfort as well. You're not alone, because when you lose someone, you feel lonely because you feel the loss, the lack. But when other people come to be with you, that is comforting. It's filling the space.
Yeah.
I have a question, Rabbi Yossi.
Can I just finish the thought? Sorry. And then we'll have your question.
Sorry.
So what we're saying is essentially the whole Jewish nation, we're all one community, we're all mourning, and we're all with you. Just like the whole Jewish nation mourned the loss of Jerusalem, so too, we're all here together as a community, as a nation, to be there with you with your loss. And that's also the reason why we call God, there are many names for God, Elohim, right? Why do we over here use a very different name, Hamakom, which means, again, Hamakom means in English omnipresent, which means God filling the space, because in a way, when we lost someone, there was a void. So the space that the person was taking up was emptied now. So we're saying that God fills the whole entire space. He's here with us to fill that void. And we have everyone together all coming to be there with you. And that can provide a sense of comfort. Yeah.
Another point about, and only God can comfort you when you lose someone. You've got to communicate with God, because only God can give you the answer.
Yes.
Consoling. But your communicator with God is, I say, is with your rabbi. The rabbi is close to God.
If you're open to that, if you feel that that's...
In order to communicate with God, you've got to do it with someone who's closer to God. So it has to be through someone like your rabbi in order to communicate with God, to do what you're saying. It's only God can console you after the loss of a loved one. Then you have to do it through someone who's close to God.
Well, I wouldn't say that a rabbi is closer to God than anyone else. I just,
Well, they know about.
They can maybe
Mark,
provide
you
some-
know about the.
right.
How to pray.
So they can help facilitate your connection to God.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
A quick question.
Yes.
When we're talking about coming to comfort the mourners, and in the first 3 days, they are allowed to be doing the weeping, but it's the person who's coming to comfort, and usually you're coming to a shiva because you've been close to the family, or it could be an extended relative. Are we allowed to cry with the mourner?
We will get to that at the last part of the session.
Okay, thank you.
So Zion had physical destruction, but spiritual indestructibility. So same to the person, we have the physical absence, but death is the physical absence, but spiritual immortality. Now, we'll take a quick vote here. This is, just looking at the time. We have these video meditations, a short video meditation. So yes or no? Should we do the meditation?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, we'll do the meditation.
The one vote.
Well, it was a very strong yes.
You got there first.
Anybody else? Yeah?
What's that?
What was that? We missed it.
No, I was taking a vote whether you guys want to do the meditation or skip it. You want to do it, okay, so we'll do it.
Fine.
Today's reflection is going to involve an image which all of us probably have an immediate and strong reaction to. It is an icon for Jewish people all over the world and throughout the ages. An image that when we see it, we have a very strong and almost reflex response. I'm speaking of the image of the Western Wall, the only remaining vestige of the once glorious Holy Temple.
Was anybody here alive and remember the 1967 when they recaptured the Western Wall?
Yeah, I watched
You remember
it.
that?
I wasn't alive, but
I wasn't, right?
Yes, I
They were,
remember
yeah.
yes, I remember watching, and my uncle was part of the liberation squad, so we had some
Wow.
pictures.
Wow.
That's amazing.
She said her
to hear, by
uncle
the
was
way.
part of the people that liberated the Western Wall in 1967.
That was the time of national.
So that was captured on video, the chief rabbi going there and blowing the shofar, right? That is a very Shlomo Goren, yes. Okay, so we're speaking about the Western Wall. Sorry, I lost
They
the.
were playing. It was beautiful.
I need to.
Strong reaction to. An image that when we see it, we have a very strong and almost reflex response. I'm speaking of the image of the Western Wall, the only remaining vestige of the once glorious Holy Temple which stood in Jerusalem and was destroyed 2,000 years ago. We're going to use this image to help us in relating to our understanding of our relationship with those who have passed on. So imagine, if you will, in your mind's eye, the image of the temple, the glorious temple as it stood, as it was built by Solomon in its royal splendor, something that was revered by peoples all over the world. And now, juxtapose that glorious image with the image of the Western Wall as it stands now and has stood for 2,000 years in its destroyed state. Go back and forth between these two images. The temple as it stood in its glory, and the temple in ruins when we only have the Western Wall. The Western Wall is a symbol of destruction. The temple is no more. And yet, think about the hope, the strength, the inspiration, the spiritual and emotional energy that emanates from that image even when the temple is in its destroyed state. Now think about a loved one who has passed on. Think about them when they were here with us in the physical world. Think about the situation at present when their physical body is no more. Are they really gone? Have they really lost their influence and power in your life? Or are they like the Western Wall? The Western Wall is an image of destruction, and yet the Western Wall is a symbol of inspiration and hope, pride, powerful, powerful emotions. Think of this image. Think of the feelings that it evokes in you. And now relate this as a symbol to those who are currently, physically, their vessel has been destroyed, but spiritually, their power is as great as ever. We'll take a moment now to reflect and to connect to this image and to relate it to our loved ones.
Very powerful idea how the Western Wall has those two opposites at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to pick up speed because there's still quite a bit that I wanted to cover. So another reason why we tear the garment is to allude to this idea as well, that just like when we're rendering a garment, it's only a garment. We're not, it's forbidden to, do something to harm our physical body. We don't do that. We only render the garment. And that is the idea that it's the acknowledging the idea that the body is only a garment of the soul, as we learned about previously. So that is what's gone. So we're tearing the garment, but ultimately the soul is still there. Fine. So now all is good and fine. In an ideal situation, a person should slowly go through the 7 days, the 30 days, and slowly be able to process and heal, and with time get the inner strength and resilience to get up and to get back to life. But what happens if somebody gets stuck, which often, like Stephanie we had in the beginning of the class? What happens if you're like Stephanie? What inspiration can we take from the Jewish toolbox to help someone who is in this, or to help ourselves if we feel stuck? So,
Elastic plier.
Which is say? Plastic
So pain is a very general word, right? Someone who feels pain. But pain is a sort of a overarching term for many different types of pain. But what could be the specific feelings that a person might be feeling when they're stuck in grief? What, if you had to describe the feeling other than just pain, what type of feelings would that be? Loss. Shock.
Guilty that they're still alive.
Guilt.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Anger. Injustice. Depending on the circumstances, right? What happened? Imagine if a young child was, killed in an accident.
And also relief, because people in the trenches.
Right.
You would be killed, but they were relieved. Like, they wasn't there.
Oh, yes. But the sort of the negative emotion. So you've got sadness, guilt, depression, injustice, anger. Okay, so now we're going to pick on the two of them, possibly the ones that are more common. And those are the first two: injustice and guilt. Injustice is it goes together with anger. It's how could this happen, especially if you believe in God? If God is good, you know, how could it happen that this person was taken? Now, obviously, this depends on the situation because you can't compare a 92-year-old who died blissfully in bed, you know, surrounded by their family, who lived a full life, compared to, I don't know, maybe you know, a young child who was struggling with, you know, with the illness and suffered
We
and
had
died.
this. So my cousin got killed in Ripley when she was 13. I was 16. The same day my parents got split up as well. That night my cousin got killed. Single parent, virtually the same.
Yeah.
What you're saying. Single parent, and she is stuck. I mean, the whole time I've just been thinking,
Wow.
she's still quite stuck. And you know, when it said about the other lady, people get fed up talking about it. I've noticed the family don't want to talk about her daughter anymore. And she says that to me. No one wants to talk about it. Because it's such a shock for her. 13 years old, her one child.
A lot of people actually in Stephanie case is quite common.
Yeah.
I think
So now we're going to just give a few tidbits, and you may say, I can hear Avi thinking in his head, oh, that I'm just opening a can of worms by some of the things we might be doing now, because it's opening up a really vast some ideas, and we're only going to touch on it. But listen, that's what it is. You know, if you have more questions, it might leave you with more questions. But we have a story of I don't know if you heard about one of the sages in the Talmud called Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was the one of the most famous. Have you heard of Rabbi Akiva? So he was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. He lived through the time, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He lived during the time of the destruction of the temple, and he actually led the Jewish. He firsthand witnessed the death of millions of people by the destruction of the temple, and he lived both through the transition of temple times to exile, when the Jewish people went to exile, and he had 5.
What's his name again, sorry?
Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Now, he had 5 very famous students. One of them was Rabbi Akiva. And
You're the same one in the Passover service, the rabbi.
yes, very good. Yeah, he's mentioned.
Serious arguments.
Yeah. So now Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lost, in addition to everything that he witnessed in the Jewish nation, you know, so many people, millions of people who were killed, he lost his own child. And he was struggling to get over the grief of losing his own child. And his students came in to comfort him. And one at a time, each one came in and tried to have his go at trying to comfort their teacher. And none of them were successful. Each one, he said, no, you're just making it worse. You're not helping. Until finally the last one came in and he said something which gave him comfort. So what did they all say? And what did the last one say different? For brevity of time, I'm just going to tell you the story rather than read it, because it's a long text. It's text 11 on page 104. So basically what happened is he lost his child, and each student comes in and basically chooses a story in the Bible of someone who lost a loved one and they were able to find comfort. So the first one in the Bible to lose a loved one was Adam, right? Because Adam, he lost his son Hevel, was killed with Cain. So the first student comes in and he says, Rabbi, you should find comfort because Adam as well, he lost his son and he was comforted. Eventually, as we see, he brings a proof from a verse that we see that he was comforted. So he said, not only are you reminding me of my own pain, you're adding on, you're making me feel sad also for Adam. You're making my pain double. That's not helping. Right. So remember, when you're going to comfort someone, say, oh yeah, you know, like somebody else who also died, that's not comforting. And then the second one came in and he said, you know, King David, he lost a loved one, and each one came in and said, you know, Aaron lost his 2 sons, and so on and so forth. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see why. It's not because it's the past, it's because it's not providing any comfort. Until the last one came in, if you want to follow along, it's sort of the last paragraph. Rabbi Elazar entered, or 3 paragraphs from the end. Rabbi Elazar entered, sat before Rabbi Yochanan and told him, let me share a parable. Your situation is similar to that of an individual to whom the king entrusted an article for safekeeping. Each day the man would weep and wail in fear, woe is to me, when will I emerge unharmed from this safekeeping role? Meaning a king gave you, let's say, a crown to watch. I'm going to feel anxious every day. I don't want it to get stolen, to get ruined. So every day I wake up, I'm like, when will this job be finished that I'll be able to give it back to him complete, and finish it and completing my job of keeping this thing for him. You, master, you had a son. He was fluent in the Torah, the prophets, and the scriptures, in the Mishnah and the Halacha, and the exegetical teachings. Yeah, and he passed from this world without sin. You should certainly accept consolation, for you have returned your deposit in perfect condition. Rabbi Yochanan responded, Rabbi Elazar, my son, you have comforted me in the most humane fashion. So, question for you. Why did he not find comfort? Well, we already know that. Why he didn't find comfort in what the first one said, and what was the message that the last student said, which gave him comfort? What was the comfort? What was the message?
He was telling him of all the great virtues of his son, and how his son was, how he, well, everything it says, he was good in the Torah, the prophets, in the scripture. He was a good student of the Torah, so he reminded him of who his son was.
Right.
Which is what we're supposed to do, like remind people of the goodness of the neshama of the person who's passed.
Right. So the problem with the first students is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was telling them, everyone is different. Just by you coming and saying Adam and King David and this one and that one, it doesn't help me. Everyone is different. They found comfort, but who says that just because it may be true that the correct thing is to be comforted, but if you cannot dictate to your emotions. If I'm feeling the pain, you can't just tell me, oh, just because so-and-so found comfort, so I should find comfort. That doesn't help. There's no path to the comfort that you're not giving me a path how to my heart can get there. What was the last one's message? Two things. Number one, he was using the parable to explain that life is a deposit.
Yeah, I like that.
What does that mean that life is a deposit? It means it's a paradigm shift. Most people, including myself, I have to say, we view our life as something which we're entitled to. It belongs to me. It's my life. I'm entitled to it. And with that's the way, it's normal to think like that. But with that way of thinking, then if a person passes away young, then I feel anger. I feel it's not fair. How come so-and-so gets to live longer and this one doesn't? It's not fair. But if you see life as a deposit, meaning life is not yours, it's actually God's. God gave it to you as a gift. And he gave it to you for the allotted amount of time that it was meant to be. And that was based on the time the soul needed to fulfill its mission. Every soul has its unique mission. We're going to speak about this in lesson 5 when we talk about reincarnation. But every person has their purpose in life. Some people can fulfill their purpose in 20 years. Some people it takes 100 years. What happens if a person doesn't fulfill their purpose? Again, we'll speak about that in lesson 5. But the idea here is very profound. It's number one, our life is a gift from God. So to give you a way of understanding this, we know based on the norms of today that a person should be able to live, 120 years. That's the norm. So when a person dies at the age of, 30 or 20, we look at that as them, not having a full life. If somebody gets to live, 120 years, they lived a full life. Imagine a world where the norm would be for people to live for 240 years. Imagine that was the norm. Then in such a world, if someone were to die at the age of 120, we would be sad. We would say, oh, they were taken in their youth, But it sounds crazy because for us in our world, 120 is a full life. Now imagine the other way around. Imagine a world where the normal thing would be to live for only 30 years, right? And somebody would die at the age of 31, right? They live an extra long life. So the whole concept of how long people should live, it's all arbitrary. And it's really, the idea is that life isn't ours that we deserve. So this is, shifting from an attitude of entitlement to an attitude of gratitude. Instead of saying, oh, this is the way I deserve to live X amount of years, no, my life is a gift. It's given to me. That's why you give the analogy of a deposit, right? He gave him something to keep. Our life was given to us by God as a gift for a mission. And that was the second point that he mentioned, that your son, he learned the Mishnah and the Talmud, meaning to say he fulfilled his mission. So even if he died young, he lived a full life. And who's to say that his life wasn't complete? Just because it may seem to us that it was a shorter life than others have, but who are we to judge?
Quality over quantity.
Depends what they did in their life.
Right? It depends what they've done, right? And
Mozart died in his 30s.
right. So if a person didn't, live a good life, they then again, lesson 5, we'll get into lesson 4 and 5. We'll get into what happens then. So these are just, again, some points. The reason why I mentioned about opening a can of worms is because there's a much broader conversation here about what happens. Let's say if a person's life is taken by somebody else. Let's say someone was killed. So the other person, obviously, are we to say that person also lived a full life? So there's all of that. It's beyond the scope of this thing. But that's anyway. Now the other type of common feeling that people can feel is feelings of guilt. Often the feelings of guilt is like, let's say for me, when my grandparents passed away, it's like I feel like, I haven't phoned them, for a while before they passed away. I should have, or maybe I'll feel bad. Let's say if it's a spouse, maybe I'll feel, I should have, wasn't good enough to them. So we feel guilty because once the person passes away, we feel like it's over and we don't have any more the opportunity to mend the relationship. And therefore we feel very guilty. So what is the message for such a feeling? The answer is, based again on what we learned in previous lessons, is that our relationship with the deceased doesn't finish. Even though physically they're deceased, but we can still, they're aware of us and we're aware of them. And we can have this relationship, albeit on a spiritual level, we can still mend our relationship. Let's say if we feel like we need to still mend the relationship, it is possible to do. We speak about saying Kaddish, going to the gravesite. There are things we can do. Some people will write a letter and throw it in the fire or tear it up, or you can do. There's different ways, but the idea is that the reason why people feel guilt is because they feel because the person died, it's over, it's finished. I can't say that thing that I would have loved. I should have said I love you. I didn't get a chance to say that. Well, you could do all of that, and also spiritually, you can send spiritual gifts. When you do a mitzvah for them, because they can no longer do a mitzvah, when you do a mitzvah for them, you're essentially, strengthening the relationship. So you don't have to feel guilty in that sense. So Rabbi Elazar, he acknowledged that everyone is different, but the student, he offered a path to comfort. So life is a deposit and exact time to fulfill the mission. Now, the different things you can do when you say Kaddish, it's like sending a regard. This was just a quote. We're not going to read it inside because of time, but it says that beautiful thing. When you say Kaddish, this is text 12. When you say Kaddish, it's like sending them regards. When you learn a Mishnah, it's like sending a letter. Nowadays, no one writes physical letters. In the olden days, you would write a letter, send it in the post, So it says that when you study a Mishnah in memory of a loved one, it's like sending them a letter.
Yeah.
Because the word Mishnah in Hebrew is the same letters as Neshama. So therefore, when you learn a Mishnah, it's good for the Neshama. And when you do a mitzvah, it's like sending them a parcel. Imagine you can send them an Amazon parcel, for their birthday. Well, when you do a mitzvah for them, because they can't do a mitzvah, you can be their hands and feet here in this world and do that for them. So that's the continuation. I'll send it to you after. That's just the video. Now, what are the actual, this will be the last section. What do we do in a Shiva house? What are the traditions when you go to visit someone in a Shiva house? So there's a custom to cover the mirrors. If you want to know the reason for that, then ask me after and I'll send you an article to read, which explains the reason for that. It's Kabbalistic. It's a Kabbalistic reason. Mourners remain in the house of mourning. They sit on low stools, no leather footwear, avoid listening to music, abstain from work. This is a very important one. We don't want to jump back into work. For the whole week, we'll be in the house. People will come visit. Like you said, we'll share the legacy about the person, about their life. The point is not to, when you jump too quick to going back to life, then you don't have enough time to process the grief. It will come back. So you have to be able to spend that time That's why it's called Shiva. Shiva means 7. Nowadays many people will only do 3 days of Shiva, but it's good to try to do all 7 days. Avoid Torah study, restrictions of bathing and laundry, prayer, services in the home. The reason why we do the services in the home is because we said that the soul comes back to the home for 7 days.
Didn't say it come.
Yes, that's fine.
Pas-
And we visit the mourners.
Not la Torah, but you
Yes.
can read the.
So let's go turn to text 14, page 112. Paul, are you here? It's a very short one. If you can read text 14 and 15. Page 112. We can't hear you? No? You're on mute. You unmute? Maybe your microphone is not connected. Yeah. Okay. Rena, did you read? Sorry, Paul, we can't hear you. Rena, are you there? Maybe Rena, you can read it?
Yeah, sure.
Text 14 and 15.
Text 14. The reward for visiting the home of mourning is for the silence. The comforters may not say anything until the mourner opens the conversation. The final word regarding a person is that of the people proclaiming the deeds. When a person, proclaiming his deeds, commenting, so-and-so was upright, so-and-so was God-fearing. When a person departs the world, God says to the ministering angels, see what people are saying about him. If they say that he had been upright and God-fearing, his soul immediately ascends to paradise. And that answers my question I gave you in week 1 about
Yeah.
tzaddikim who die on Shabbat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so that would make them righteous. That's why they go straight to paradise.
So sometimes we wonder, should I call? Should I not call? Should I go visit? Should I not go visit? Maybe my visit will be a burden for them. So what's the Jewish perspective when you're in doubt how to be there for someone who is mourning? So the general rule is go, because better an unwanted visit than an unexplained absence. So go. But the question is, once you go, the reward for visiting is for the silence. It's not for saying anything. It's just for the being there, because the presence is really what brings the comfort. Again, they're feeling the loss. So by you being there, you're just showing your support. Now, can anyone offer a reason? Why does it say that the comforters may not say anything until the mourner opens the conversation? So the way it works is you sit there and you're silent. And you don't begin speaking. You don't begin asking questions, saying things. You wait for the mourner to open the conversation. Anyone can explain why that
They're
is?
going through a process. And you don't really want to interrupt that process, but if they need to speak or just see you're there or feel it, they've got that there so they can carry on. It's just, I don't know, not like a resource.
I think it's
Just
the
what?
comforter's job to tell them what to do. They've got
Yeah.
to be allowed time and space to mourn in
Right.
their own way.
Space,
That
yeah.
shouldn't interrupt that process.
Right. So different people mourn differently. So when you're going to come in and you think, you want to ask something and you might think that what you're saying is sensitive, they might be offended by that. So you don't know what the person wants. You don't know. Some people like, maybe they will like to make a joke. And in that case, you can go on with it. Let them set the tone for the mood, and then you're there to support them. You're not there to, decide how they should mourn or what to talk about
You
or
can't-
what mood or tone to have. It's up to them to decide.
You can't take God's place either.
Right, exactly.
What did you say? It's better and explain and better.
Better an unwanted visit than an unexplained absence, which means if in doubt, you should go, you should make the call, make the visit, because
And if you call and the person said no.
so that's what I'm saying. Better you call, and if they say sorry, it's not a good time now, then it's okay. But what would have happened if they were waiting for you to call and you didn't call?
And you didn't.
You'll have no
I think you show your support by being prepared to be humiliated.
Right.
If
Yeah.
They don't want to see.
Right.
I think that in itself is a sign of support.
Yeah, but there are so the mourners open the conversation. This is a very important one. I've been in many Shiva houses. And for some reason there is this. I don't know if it's only here in the UK or if it's probably in America. I'm sure it's the same. But there's almost like it almost feels like a party. Does anyone relate to? They're bringing out food and whiskey and they're drinking and laughing and they're entertaining.
Yeah.
So, right, it's quite.
Not the same.
So this is not a Jewish solemn.
Yes, that's right.
So don't attempt to lighten the mood, because by doing that, what you're doing is you're distracting them. Whereas the goal of Shiva is to help them process and reflect. Not distracting doesn't help anything.
No respect.
And don't say anything, and don't ask or say anything intrusive. So not to philosophize. Like this is what Avi was actually saying. So it's a good question. You were saying before about the letter. When you come and try to give explanations, you're like philosophizing that yes, but the soul continues on, so therefore you should find comfort. By doing that it's not your job to do. This is between them and God, but not our job to do that to them. That could make them feel. It could diminish their pain. It could minimize what they're feeling, right? So now, here are some phrases that you should never say. I'm just going to read them from here. Never say, were you there when he died? Don't say that. Because if they weren't, they might feel very sad about that. Did she die from the cancer or the chemo?
Quite a good point though, right? That really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
Did you know in advance, or was it sudden?
Yeah, that's weird.
Did he have life insurance?
Yeah.
Some people
Or
are there though.
yes, or God only takes the good ones. Or anything.
Said a lot.
Yeah.
That with my cousin.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
Any sentence that begins with the words "at least," no.
No.
Or also, yeah. So those.
A lot of that is said.
So those are what we should not do. So what should we do? So we said the real thing is just silence. Honestly, you don't have to say anything. The tradition is before you leave, you get up. There is the text Hamakom Yenachem, which we say. But if anything, this is what you should do: discuss the legacy. Talk about because why discussing the legacy? You're helping them go from passive depression to active mourning. Discuss about the beautiful life that they lived. And things that they accomplished, stories about the person who passed away. It helps them process the pain and perpetuates the mourner's relationship with the departed and shifts their focus to the gift of life that they had. And it also benefits the soul because as Rina, as you mentioned, as you read very beautifully, the final text we read, when we actually say good things about the person, this is very interesting. It says that when the soul goes up, they hear what we're talking about down here. When they hear us saying good things about the person, they say straight to paradise. So with that, we conclude the lesson, and now we'll just play the summary of today's lesson.
Lesson 3. The Morning After. 1. Everyone reacts to and deals with grief differently. No two people are psychologically alike, and no two circumstances of death and bereavement are the same. 2. It is a mitzvah to mourn the loss of a loved one. Processing a loss is critical to the healing process, and this is accomplished by Shiva, a mandatory period of grieving. 3. The Torah validates and encourages mourning, but only for a prescribed period of time, after which the mourner is enjoined to transition back to normal life. 4. Some ideas that give a mourner the strength to move on. A. The knowledge that the soul lives on and is not diminished by death. B. It is never too late to mend or improve our relationship with the deceased. Though our physical relationship has ended, we can still give him or her spiritual gifts. C. Life is a deposit, and God decides when to give it and when it must be returned. D. For this soul and its unique mission, this constituted a full life. 5. It is a mitzvah to comfort mourners. The most basic principle of comforting a mourner is simply being there. Our presence offers comfort and lessens the loneliness that often accompanies mourning.
Next week is where we go. This is where do we go? Where does the soul go? Heaven and hell. That's the topic of next week. What does Judaism believe about that? Okay, so that's going to be next week. And with that, I'm just going to end the Zoom. Rabbi Yossi, please. Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to end it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yes.